All right, we're back with another episode of Playing Through, and got my good buddy Jason Rhoades with me, and I'm excited for this episode. We've been trying to get this time put for a while.
A little while.
um,
I wasn't trying to avoid you.
I know. But it's cool because I think one of the things that I'm excited for this episode is our relationship, number one, but number two, the men that I'm surrounded by have amazing stories of overcoming, and it fills our narrative of what we're trying to do here. And
Right.
so, in a second, I'm going to have you introduce yourself and just kind of give us some background. But the purpose of this episode is, I know we're going to talk about some heavy stuff, but it's about overcoming. It's not letting your past own your future, right? And
Yep.
so, um, I'm excited to get into that. I'm excited for our listeners to hear your story. And with that, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little background.
Yeah, my name's Jason Rhoades. Wife is Callie, two boys, Ty and Brett. Um, uh, we moved up to this area 15 years ago from the Bay Area. Um, Love it up here. Go to District Church. I'm a Christian, which is one of the biggest things, right? And 19 years clean and sober.
Awesome. And with that, first of all, I mean, whether it's one day or 30 years clean and sober, that's a big deal.
Right.
And I know we'll touch on that, but if you wouldn't mind, just if we can go back,
Yeah.
and then just kind of whatever you're willing to kind of share with us
Yeah.
about the addiction, what the addictions were,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of the history behind that.
Yeah, so as with most people, the formative years are high school. I was an athlete. Sports was a big part of my story, so I was going to start there. Junior year of high school is kind of when it kind of kicked off for me. I had two very distinct group of friends because I played basketball and I played baseball. So, my basketball boys I had grown up with, playing ball since 6th grade. These were the straight arrow guys, the guys that did all the right things, all the, rule followers, and that was me. I mean, that was me until, sophomore, junior year. My baseball guys, not that way.
Hate to hear
And
it.
I was that guy, right? So I'm not blaming that because that was, I gravitated towards the wrongdoing, the partying, the smoking weed and drinking and all that stuff kind of started junior year. Um, so I played 3 years of varsity baseball to, after my junior year, I was a better baseball player. So after my junior year, that summer we had Legion baseball back then, American
Yep.
Legion. So no travel ball. All the best high school players played in that. We had guys drafted on our team. I was playing against drafted, pitchers at the time. Um, Absolutely crushed it that summer, like just raking the ball off of like, guys who were going to the next level guys. And so going into my senior year, it was like I'm playing baseball in college. It's just a matter of D1 or D2 and how much work are you willing to put in, all that stuff. So my high school baseball coach at the time was pressuring me to quit basketball, as they do,
Right.
right? Because basketball leaks into baseball season. I was a starting shortstop, all that stuff. We had a good team. I loved basketball, loved it. But all my homies, all my guys, I had grown away from the good guy, and I was like one of those
Right.
guy. I just enjoyed partying and hanging out. So when this was kind of, and I'm going over this because it's kind of a crossroads moment in those formative years. I had the decision, but the light bulb went off in my head was like, oh wait, I don't have to work my ass off for 3 months getting ready for basketball season, and I can hang out with my friends. It's my senior year. I'll put all this extra work in, go to the cages, take extra ground. Didn't do any of that. All I did was just amp up the drinking and the weed and introduced to other drugs during that time. So quit basketball. One of the biggest regrets. I was a starter on the team, all that stuff, and I loved it, but played my senior year, did well, but like I said, did not put in the extra work um, at all. Ended up going to UC Davis to play ball. Um, fall ball, crushing it, end up breaking my wrist. And so at that time, I was struggling even to pass a class at Davis. It was like, am I going to work to get back? Because I was doing well, but I decided to redshirt. And when that happened, it was just like I stopped going to class. I wasn't going to be able to even be eligible to play baseball at the end of this year. It was me and my buddy had an apartment off campus, which bad idea. And so the escalation began that year. We had basically a drug dealer living in our apartment complex. So when I was hurt, knew I wasn't going to play baseball, not going to school. It was just complete debauchery. And so things were set in motion that year, really, to a degree.
And what kind of outside of the alcohol and weed, what other drugs were introduced at that point?
Meth.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Meth, cocaine.
right off the bat.
Yeah. So I had tried that and was doing that my senior year of high school
Okay.
occasionally. But that was like, an escalation to where, I for several months wasn't even going to school, was just partying.
Let's pause
So,
right there. Hang on.
yeah,
So as a police officer,
yeah,
you know, alcohol and marijuana, those are
yeah.
entry level, right?
Right.
Methamphetamine's a whole nother
Yeah,
substance. Like
yeah,
that's
yeah,
you went from the minor leagues to the
yeah.
big leagues and
And it was very rampant at that time in Antioch.
okay.
It was so it was easy to come across. And then as fortunes would have it, a guy living in our apartment complex, we're 18 years old, living by ourselves. And that was like kind of that first time doing it a lot during that time. But I ended up getting, leaving, coming back home and played baseball at Los Badones College and JC, got my act together kind of. A lot of my old, guys that I knew from the area were playing there. Um, did very well, had, kind of a great year, all conference, all that stuff at in JC. So I was back to that going into that second year as I was going into my senior year. Okay, this is put in the work. It's a matter of whether it's D1 or D2. You can go play baseball, go to college again. You'll be older. You have, I was kind of in that space right there. Well, I went the other way. I didn't put the extra work in. I got out of shape. I was drinking more. I was back in Antioch. I was just, it was just looking back, I should have went and played JC somewhere else because being in that hometown area, it kind of caught up to me.
Well, and the accessibility is there, right? You're
Right.
familiar with your territory. You
Yeah.
know people that can get you stuff either on the sly or whatever it is. But the accessibility
Yeah.
is there. You're gonna go
So
after it.
I stopped caring. I stopped caring. Didn't have a great season that second year. I was hated school. I already knew halfway through that season I didn't want to go to school anymore. So wasn't going to play anymore. So I quit school for 2 years, and that's where that pattern of addiction really, you know, took off. I had a job and was just partying, and that's what I was doing
Did
for
you? Was it now? Were you still drinking? And was there like as far as like usage is what I'm trying to get into? Like how much were
every
you
day.
using
Yeah,
every day?
yeah, every day, smoking weed every day.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, showing up for practice high.
right.
You know, I mean,
That's wild.
yeah, I mean, that was hungover.
I
You
think of
know,
putting a Zen in
so
for a
so
little bit, and
so
it's
so not only not putting the extra work in and being focused, but actually detracting from just showing up and playing.
right.
you know, so but I had like an epiphany 2 years after being out of school, I decided to go back to school, not to play ball, but just go try to make something of myself. So I ended up going back to Chico, which has, if you want to share.
I mean I did pitch for the Chico Outlaws for a minute. Yeah, that's probably a terrible choice. You might as well have
Right.
gone to ASU at that
Right,
point,
right.
yeah.
But you know what the funny thing is because, the meth thing in Antioch, and I was doing more and more of that, it was kind of in my warped sense of, getting away from that, which I did, and I'm sure you can find it
Yeah.
anywhere, but I did get away from that for those years and, not that I didn't smoke weed and drink and all that stuff, but first year was fun, did all my classes, was doing well, and then a lot of my friends that were there which is the reason why they were in their final year. I was on the 7-year plan. So they left and I kind of moved into an apartment by myself that second year, and that was really like an isolating cuz I wasn't hanging out with frat boys and dorm in the dorm. I wasn't in the college
Right.
lifestyle. I was kind of older, so I kind of really got depressed a little bit, almost even in college. It's like I was living by myself, isolated. Had a few friends. We would drink. I drank, a lot more. Um, so it was kind of like it wasn't a fun college experience at
Did
all.
you feel kind of like you knew you had all this talent and yet kinda
Yeah.
like, "Well, here I
That
am."
kinda that kind of, like, was a weight on me at that time, you know?
Yeah,
Like
that's
like the whole wasted talent thing, Not not that I had the talent to play professional, but I definitely had the talent to play D1 baseball and would have been a fun experience and, you know, um, obviously staying in that regimented sports atmosphere, is supposed to spill over into other areas of your life,
well, you see it
Um,
all the time, though. I mean, you see, professional athletes using,
yeah,
it's like it's not you're not
totally.
immune from,
No,
the
totally.
habit. It's
Yeah.
definitely and then in fact, I would even say that athletes probably have it even worse because they have addictive personalities to whether it's,
Yeah.
always never being satisfied with where they're at, right? And that can go in a plus or minus where you're, hey, I got to grind out to become the best player that I can
Yeah.
be, or you have that skill set, but you take it the other direction. Like, well, I'm a waste of talent,
Yeah.
and then you hit that depression mode, and it's just like, well, I'm just gonna spiral out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had definitely the cycle of addiction was going during this time. I need to stop. I'm quitting on Monday. This is the last time on this, like, and then you would fail, it was like that, over and over. The shame and the guilt started to happen during those couple years there in Chico. And then I reconnected with my wife, Callie. She had graduated from Fresno last year. Sorry, gonna get a drink of water. My last year at Chico, so I started commuting back to Antioch, back and forth to see her because I was finishing out my last year at Chico. Started reconnecting with some people I shouldn't have been reconnecting with during that time, and started using again. And then graduated from Chico. This was '98. Um, I think May or June of '98. That summer, had visited a buddy's house, good friend. I walked in, they were smoking meth. I had never done that.
How did you do it?
Nor snorting.
Snorting it? Okay.
Like coke or
Okay.
So that was the first experience with that. And that was like I was like, where has this been?
Yeah, it's a game changer.
I mean, that was a game changer. And I try to explain that to people like same drug, not the same drug. Completely different I mean, so within, a few months, I was a full-fledged drug addict.
Yeah, I mean,
Separate,
the intake is just different because 'cause you're
yeah.
now inhaling it instead
Yeah.
of, letting your I mean We don't have to get into all this, but it's
No, so here I am, I have a degree, I get a job, I'm supposed to be moving on with my life, putting the party days behind me, and yet I'm escalating it to this place that's only going to end badly,
and how
very
old are you at this
badly.
point? Like 23-ish, probably?
This was 98, so I was, what was I 26?
Okay.
So that that was a fast descent down. I mean, all normal friends disconnected from, disconnected from family, like, I mean, to the pits of hell, like darkness, you know, um, up for days at a time, the whole deal. Now, mind you, I'm working at Frito Lay during this time, had a job, got I was moved out of my house and had my own place, but it was just a shipwreck, just waiting to happen. Um, um, I mean, we're talking like daily meth use for months and months. My parents um, did family intervention, so this was like May of '99 now. So Callie and I had split up during, obviously.
Knowing her, I can see that.
So, um, so we had the intervention, the family, her sister, everybody reading letters, and my parents had already arranged a 30-day rehab up in Marin County. So that was my first, and I went. I was, willing at that time. And went to this rehab, and that was kind of my first time doing the steps and getting some recovery tools. And like, I spent 30 days there. I spent probably 5 days sleeping the
Okay.
first 5 days. you know I'm just and when I kind of came out of that, kind of coming down and getting my mind again, I was like, you know what the hell happened, you know? Um,
Was it like a
it
blackout
was just
phase?
like a whirlwind,
Oh.
you know? Oh yeah, there was a lot of blackout phase during that time. Um, but yeah, so I mean, I came out of there completely with a different mindset, that I was gonna, I'm ready to put this behind me. I have, they take you through the first three steps of AA during, you're during that time there, and then you have a program following there, a sober living environment, 90 meetings in 90 days, and got a sponsor and did all that stuff. Um, and that Callie and I got back together during that time, ended up getting married in 2000. So I was doing great. And then got it in my head that, well, it was just that dang meth, I can drink again, you know, I just want to be normal like everybody else and drink, you know. And so that kind of started a phase of relapsing over the first 5 years of our marriage. It was pretty hell for her.
And that thought process, I'm sure a lot of people resonate with because it's
Yeah.
you're self-identifying at that point because
Hmm.
you're like, okay, like obviously meth is an issue.
Yeah.
Hardcore drugs are an issue.
Yeah.
Everybody else can handle their alcohol for the most part. Like maybe this was just my issue. And so I
Yeah.
don't think that's a negative thing, right?
Yeah.
Initially,
Yeah. I mean, and that's how I compartmentalized it in my mind.
right?
I was like, I didn't think I had an alcohol problem, but I did, all
Right.
through those years. I did, and that was only going to lead me back to the drug of choice, that they usually say. So it was a rough, you know, first part of our marriage.
Were
Just
you
the
hiding it? Oh,
Yeah, I mean, I had several times where it was like, okay, I need to stop drinking, and I would, and then I would always talk family and her and everything I was always good at manipulating the situations to my, what I wanted to do. And so I had those periods of time where I was okay drinking for a while, and then and then that would escalate a little bit, and then I would end up, drunk one night and like end up at the wrong place, and did that several times. You know,
How is that? I mean, at this point, you guys didn't have Ty yet.
not yet.
So,
2004.
okay, so you went to rehab in 99,
Hmm.
did well. You guys got back together in
Right.
2000, married,
Yep.
and then had a few good years.
Yep.
How
Well, not really.
that's
I
where you
mean,
but that's where you started, like, just
y-
kinda dabbling back in, and
yeah,
then
yeah,
that's where it
yeah.
became a problem.
Yes,
So,
yes.
mentally, where were you at in that point of life as far as, because you should be on a high as far
Yeah,
as like, "Hey,
yeah,
I got Callie back.
yeah,
I got this marriage. I'm getting a second chance at all this stuff."
yeah.
What
You would think.
what do you well, and I think that, for an addict, like, it's hard, right? It's like because you can't really
Mhm.
rationalize kinda what you're going through, and so,
Yeah.
I don't wanna put any words in your mouth, but, like, if you can remember back, like, mentally where you were at in that point, did you think you were just good and you could handle it? Or was it like there's the depression and other things eating at you?
No, I thought that I could handle it. I wanted to, because for a while I had separated myself even from my, friend group that partied, but they were like normal
Right.
like weekend guy. I wanted to get back to, I was back with that group of people. And it was hard. I guess it was hard for me to be around it without engaging in some of
So
it.
so what was the rock bottom moment then?
So, yeah, so Callie was, let's see, Ty was 1 years old. She was pregnant with Brett, and this was the last time that I had relapsed, and it was kind of like one of those moments where she was walking out the door, if it happened again, and it was my parents were there, and they were like, everybody was like, "What is wrong with you? You have a family." Um, I didn't know what was wrong with me. But at that time, I knew something was wrong with me,
Yeah,
because I'm jeopardizing now my family. So and I know this phrase now, but I didn't then. I said it was like a hole in my soul somewhere that I was trying to fill, that I found out later that only the Holy Spirit can fill, and we'll get into that. But I didn't know that. I didn't know God at that time. So that was like the rock bottom moment where I had something, some kind of a desire to change. Um,
because you're gonna lose it all.
and to
And
lose
it
it all.
and was there do you think the difference this time was because in the first time, like, okay, you're just kind of wasting your own talent and your own
Right.
future, but you're
Right.
single, you're
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever, like I'm
Yeah.
good with that. But now that you have people depending on you,
Yes.
is that a
Yeah.
bigger factor in that?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, yeah, I could, there's a lot of lost brain cells over the years and memories, and I remember that day.
Well, I
So
mean, meth will do that to you, and
yeah,
definitely alcohol as well. I mean, that's
yeah, it was, like I said, it was rough. So, you know, what do you do? Because I've already been going to doing AA. I've already done the steps. I've already, none of this stuff seemed to help. So, my sister and brother-in-law were going to a local church in Brentwood. We had moved out there, and I'm like, these are their friends. Is kind of like, that group of friends that I had left in high school for the other.
the basketball guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was what I saw, that like, wow, they're happy, they're doing things, they're going to church, they drink, but they're just a normal group. Not that I want to drink, but I want just the good group of people
Right.
to be an influence in my life. So we ended up starting to go to church, and this was a new church, so there was like they were setting up in a gym, and so I got on the setup team, and was just we got involved with the church, and that was my first, you know, time, you know, learning about Jesus.
And how did that moment kinda transpire going forward? Is it like, you're in this new you got this other opportunity now. Okay, like, here, I'm putting my foot down,
Yep.
and then what was from that moment forward, what did that look like as far as going forward on that?
As putting my foot down as far as the drugs and alcohol.
All of that, because I mean, I personally believe that it's not just the drugs and alcohol,
Mhm.
it's other
Yeah.
choices as well
Yeah.
in there,
Yeah.
and allowing, like you said, like,
Well
the people that are influencing you, everything else is, contributing factors.
one major thing that I learned and I know, you can't just remove the alcohol and the drugs, something has to replace it. You're going to replace it with something.
Mm,
So, church was a big one for me. I mean, I started, working out and, snowboarding, skiing, doing all like trying to be more active and into things that I wasn't doing before. Just being a dad. Obviously, I had a built-in, you know,
yeah.
purpose. I mean, it was just to clear that baggage out so I could see what was in front of me, you know.
Was there anybody in your life that was a pivotal person for that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, there was several. I mean, obviously my parents and my sister and brother-in-law and their friends, but the pastor of the church knew my whole story. He was a young guy, friends with my brother-in-law. He was his youth pastor growing up, and so he knew my story. And they were a big part. He was a big part of help. Meeting with me. Scott Kirk was his name. Meeting with me and kind of teaching me just this whole Christianity Bible thing, which I was new to, and so he was a big part of that. But the big turning point, I felt like at this time I was kind of just checking the boxes. I knew what I should do, and I was doing it for the first time. I knew what I needed to do, but I wasn't feeling compelled and like changed yet. Um, so early on in that time, we had a men's retreat up at Santa Cruz at Mount Hermon. It was a men's group, and that's where it all sort of happened for me. It was at one of the worship nights, and Pastor Scott was there, and we were praying over people in the back of the room. And I had come back there, and like I said, he knew my whole story. So he starts going as the music's playing, hands are on me, including his, and he's praying for me and going. I don't even remember what he said to this day. I just remember feeling a warmness over me, a um, and then a coolness and this feeling that something was lifted out of. I'm not making
Yeah, I
this
believe
up.
it.
It was a spiritual awakening for me in that moment. It had been I had been leading up to this, but it was in that moment that I think I just surrendered whatever it was I was trying to hold on to, quite frankly, because I was still, even though I was changing my friend, changing the people I was around, putting good influences in me, going to church, serving, doing all these things, I still had something weighing at me, and that was lifted that night. I came back after that after that trip, and I walked into the door, and Callie like said, "What happened to you?" Like I looked different. My eyes, something was changed. And from that moment on, I had never had another desire to pick up a drink or a drug.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And I totally can resonate with that in multiple ways, but it's like, I think when we started this journey, you have a lot of people that look on us as men, number one, just as a culture, right? Men.
Mhm.
And we're in such a confused culture right now of what that is supposed to be. And then you take and add spirituality into that.
Yep.
And it's another level of I don't know,
Yeah.
and it's like
Yeah.
that's fine. Like
Yeah.
your own you don't have to believe what we believe.
Yeah.
That's not,
No,
what we're
totally.
here about. But I think the one thing since I've started this project is I've seen more and more people only get help when they accept Christ in their life,
Yeah.
right? And I
Yeah.
think that there is no doubting that for sure. I fully believe that. But everybody that I've talked to, I mean, all of the success stories for the most part that I have talked to have all pointed back to that one
Yeah.
moment where
Yeah.
they, you know,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be in church. It doesn't have to,
Yeah.
being a Christian isn't about
Yeah.
going to church.
Yeah.
That's just a place where people
And
gather
for
and
some people, it's not one moment.
right,
I did have that one moment. For some people, it's a progression, and you know, AA, it works for people. It didn't necessarily work for me because I didn't let it.
right.
I didn't surrender. I surrendered in that moment to Jesus, and the Holy Spirit came in that hole, and it was, off to the races from there. And then, of course, like all addicts, I got addicted to
Yeah,
Jesus,
yeah. But what
and
a healthy
and
addiction.
you know and started a recovery program at that new church. We had a new building. We started a group called Grace Recovery, and so pouring into other people during those early years of my sobriety made some of my best friends during this time was huge. Was huge for me. Not that I was, gonna drink again or use again. I had not even thought of that, but it was just, to help other people during that time was very gratifying for.
When you look back on this phase in life and just it's not really a phase because you're still living it out.
Yeah.
But when you look back at that specific time frame, mentally where you were then and mentally where you are now, what are the main differences in that?
Yeah, then I was living my life how I knew I should and wanted to. I wasn't like faking it or like doing things because I thought that I should be doing it. I was compelled and convicted to want to do things, both as a father, as a husband, as somebody in the church, leading a group, all those things. I wasn't doing it because I thought that I needed to make penance for my past mistakes. I was living in it and felt that fire in me to want to be better, you know.
Some of the people that, we get responses from or people that I've talked to along the way are one of their biggest concerns and fears is the fear of judgment and the fear of, always having your past thrown back in your
Yeah,
face.
yeah.
And I think that um I've been there. I
Mhm.
know different people's stories and
Yep.
I've been fortunate enough to have people open up to me, but looking at that, was that a fear for you? And then how is that
Never.
awesome?
Never was. I was as honest as can be about everything that I ever did with everybody and had no, if you don't like it,
I will say from the day
that's
I've
it.
met you, you have been exactly that. And I think but that's one of the things I admire and I respect most about you because it's hard to have that.
Yeah.
It really is because
Yeah.
it's humbling, and
Yeah.
I've worked a career that, is you see people on a daily basis that are stuck in their addictions, but
Yep.
a lot of the stories that came out of that were because they're stuck in it because nobody believes in them to get them out of that as
Yeah.
well. Because
Yeah.
I firmly believe you can't do it on your own.
Yeah. No,
Um,
no, you
I'm
cannot.
sure there are people that have, but
Y-
that's
Yeah.
1%.
Yeah. I mean, it's because, sobriety is about connection and community and, you know, not just removing the, drug or the alcohol. It's really connection with other people and growing in whatever, for me and you, it's our faith and family and but there has to be something in place of that.
Yeah. A lot of people ask me, okay, like you did a thing on, we had Jeff on
Mhm.
last and it was on alcoholism.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Well, how does that fit in with mental health?" And
Yeah.
I'm like, "How does it not?"
Yeah.
We're not talking
Yeah.
mental illness,
Yeah.
right? Like we
Yeah.
can. We totally can, but that's a different ballpark.
Yeah.
Mental health is everything,
Yeah.
right? It's how we're processing the world mentally,
Yeah.
how we're living out in our calling is being men,
Mhm.
being fathers, husbands. friends, like what are we doing in our community to
Yep.
uplift our community?
Yep.
And that's why we pair this with athletes as well, is because, I remember when I was in my lowest of lows, like I would go to baseball games to try and just escape reality for a couple hours,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and then not really realizing that those guys that I was going to go see are also going through crap too. But what's their escape? You know, and to have that reality is like, well, what are we doing for each other? Like that's one of the things that, where you excel because you're, in my opinion, knowing you, you don't just think of yourself. You're always doing something for other people, whether it's serving here or
Yeah.
doing anything. I mean,
Mhm.
whether we're out, smoking
Yeah.
cigars or
Yeah.
hanging out, like
Yeah.
whatever it is, it's you always put other people first.
Yeah.
And so, um, it's having that servant heart, right? That
Yeah, totally. And coming from addiction, you're naturally a selfish person.
right.
And I'm not saying and I am. And that's always been a struggle to get come out of that because the weird thing is when you're first getting sober, your loved ones think that it's, all about them and all about, you know, the kids and all about doing all these things, but you have to still work on yourself,
Yeah.
right? So you still have to be in some ways selfish about your recovery. And so that's a hard dynamic in those early years to, you have a spouse that's just been through the ringer. You're good, you're you're sober, you're clear-minded. Can't you just put that stuff, away? Well, you still have to work through steps mentally because like you said, you know, yes, it's alcohol and drugs, but it's depression, it's shame, it's guilt, it's the cycle of just constantly letting yourself down, trying to have discipline and then failing, all the lying and the deceit, the dishonesty, all that just stuff that you're coming out of is just, a lot to work through, you know.
Your transparency on this issue is incredible. And so I have a question personally. So for me, with my mom lost her battle to alcoholism. Um and it was a weird time for me because I was in a different mentality. I was getting phone calls from local law enforcement to come deal with her and like,
Yeah.
hey, she's calling the cops, all these things,
Yeah.
right? And I was fed up.
Yeah.
I was fed up. I had zero compassion.
Yeah.
And I think partly some of that was justified, but a lot of it wasn't.
Right.
Because I never, like when I sat down with her, I was intense. Like I'm like, I can't bring
Yeah.
my kids around this. I
Yeah.
can't. I choose not to
Yeah.
because I don't want them to see that.
Yeah. 100%.
I love you, but this is ridiculous,
Right.
and then I forced her into rehab, which was, I think it's still the right move, but it's like without compassion, there's no like I'm just throwing her in somewhere and expecting, something to change instead of like
Yeah.
being a part of that
Right.
change,
And
right? And
that's
so
hard. Yeah.
my question is for somebody like me or somebody listening, whether they're the addict or the loved one, what's what approaches, worked for you as far as I mean, I know you had the intervention, but like it's not I guess what I'm trying to say is like it's not just the approach, it's the follow through, right? Like
Yeah.
what are some key things that we can do to help people out with that?
Yeah. People are good at managing their addiction, right? I mean, some better than others. I would say that being better at managing your addiction is almost worse in some cases, because I got to the point of where I sucked at it. So I think once you do get sober, like I said, it's about letting people come into your life, letting people know your story. We talk about it all the time in our men's group, that fifth gospel. It's like,
Mm,
you're this is your test, this is your story now, you know? And so when I started sharing that with people at our church, you would not believe the outpouring of, love and support and, I have this, my friend or my daughter or my son is dealing with this, and just talking to people about that is so helpful for them. But it was hard for Callie during those, years just because she had been through so much and I was, you know, motivated and on fire for this recovery, group that we were doing at the church, and I was, you know, a lot of my mind and time was on doing that sort of thing, and so it was, there's little resentments that come up during that, and like it's hard for, everybody thinks that, you just put the drugs aside, put the drinking aside, and live happily ever after. That's not the way it is. you
Right?
know
It's a constant battle,
it
and
is.
those battles change too, right?
Yes.
It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I've we're over this hump, but there's
Yeah.
plenty of other humps that come with life.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, the the whole managing the addiction thing, I was thinking about that a lot when I was thinking about this. And there's so many people out there, they may not be a meth addict. They might not even be stage 4 alcoholic, whatever it is, but there's a lot of people out there that don't want to be doing what they're doing, and they keep letting themselves down, and they are in that shame and guilt and cycle, albeit whatever level that is, but it still detracts from their surroundings and what they're doing and their family, life, whatever it is. So, my prayer for them is just, if they're watching this, just it doesn't have to be that way. No matter what your level of addiction is, if you're going through the I shouldn't be doing this and then do it and then I shouldn't be, and then you're going whatever level that is, it doesn't have to be that way because, removing that from your life, it's not, a lot of people think, oh my God, I'm not going to have fun anymore. What am I going to do? Well, let me tell you, it's a lot more fun and there's a lot more contentment and peace, with that removed out of your life, not just the drug or the alcohol, but that mental cycle and game that you're playing with
Yeah.
yourself constantly.
Well, and it goes along with the term too. I mean, we're in June right now, and June is slated also as Men's Mental Health Month as well, right? And so, it's one of the best things I've heard lately is people want to hear from you, not about you,
Mm,
right? And so
yeah,
whether that's, you lose your addiction battle with, and you lose
yeah,
it to suicide, or you
yeah,
whatever the case may be, I mean, it's not just suicide, it's depression. Depression leads, like we are talking with Jeff, like depression leads to DUIs.
yep,
Well, DUIs lead to fatal car crashes,
yeah,
and you're not
yeah,
just affecting yourself, you're
yeah,
affecting other people. Same thing with drugs.
yeah,
And it's like I think that message that you say is so good because it's, one of the questions that I have for people that come on here is like, well, what would you say to other people? I mean, first
yeah,
of all, you just led with my prayer for that. It's like that's the biggest thing. Like,
yeah,
we have to pray for these people. We have
yeah,
to because it's not
yeah,
they can't do it alone.
yeah.
And some people are forced to, and unfortunately, they lose that battle.
And the thing is it's not always that drug addict that you pass by that, oh my God, I feel sorry for him, let's pray. It's people like us.
Mhm.
It's there's no way of telling from the outside,
Right.
and those type of people was for a while, but you know, you can fool a lot of people, but you're not fooling yourself.
Yeah.
You're always in your head, and you're not going to be the best version of yourself when your focus is always on this cycle that you've got, this merry-go-round you got yourself on.
Well, I think that's a good point too. Is like so, one of the guys that I lost in my life that meant the most to
Mhm.
me was one of my captains and mentor, and um, it's just a constant reminder of you got to check in on those that are checking in on you,
Yes.
because those are the guys that are having the silent
Yeah.
battles, right? It's like
Yep. Yeah.
they're reaching out in a different type of
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
um, and so I think part of my mission and vision of this project is to really challenge myself too of like, hey, call somebody randomly, like check in on people, like, and
That's a
don't just
great
do it to
point.
check the box, right? Like, go I mean, if all you have is a phone call, that's great, do it. But go get these
Right.
guys and sit down for a cup of coffee. I mean, I
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
one of my buddies is playing baseball right now, and we won't get into who it is, but it's he was in town and we just went and sat down. He was struggling just with self-confidence,
Mhm.
and it's like, dude,
Yeah.
Major League Baseball player,
Yeah.
man. Like
Yeah.
you've got the world by the horns right
Yeah.
now, and what you're not doing is enjoying it.
Yeah.
And you need to get back to enjoying it. And I feel like that message is so important because it's not just for those guys, it's for everybody.
Well, and that's why it's so awesome what you're doing with this podcast and your company and all that, because it's about real conversations. Like us men, it's we gravitate towards the locker room talk,
Right.
just bullshitting about the latest sports,
Right.
season or whatever's going on. We don't, and it's not about tapping into your feelings or what, it's just real conversation.
Yeah.
It's just being real.
Yeah.
Like what's going on?
When you lose guys with that, right? Hey, how you
Yeah.
feeling today?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
dumbest question. I feel like shit, dude. Like, what do you want to do? You want
Yeah.
to go shoot? You want to go golf? Like, what do you?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I want to go golf. And then you get someone out there,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Yeah.
hey, no, man, how are the kids? How's the
Yeah.
wife? How's whatever is going on? And don't
So
just
it's
ask a question. Listen to the answer.
so it's the way you approach it
Right.
when you are looking to reach out and connect with people.
Right.
It's not so sit down and tell me about your
Oh my
feelings.
God. Like, check. But it's, John Maxwell, and I think I quote him all the time, but it's like he said one of the most impactful things that I've ever heard is nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And it's like that hit me
Yeah.
so hard when I first heard it that
Yeah.
I've never forgotten it because
No, that's good.
well, yeah, like
Yeah.
who care? Like, you're not gonna fix my problem. I'm not gonna fix your problem.
Right.
But how much more impactful is it when you know that I'm gonna walk through that problem with you,
Yeah.
right? Like, hey, I don't know how to do this, but I'm not gonna let you, you know, not like gonna let you sink and just watch you instead of
Yeah.
throwing you a life raft. Like
Yeah.
there's a freaking life raft right here.
Yeah.
But hey, man, I believe in you. You can swim, dude. Like,
Yeah. No,
we're out in the
totally.
middle of the Pacific, dude. Like, not only is it water, but I got sharks. I got everything else out here.
And it is hard for guys, like, as as you're going through this, just to be real and to have those conversations. That's why I'm super grateful now that I get to be a part of our men's group here
Mhm.
that I'm leading. And it's not that it's a recovery group, you know, that comes into play, but it's a bunch of guys sitting around having real conversations, you
But
know.
and I think my point too is it is a recovery group because everything
Everybody's
is.
yeah, everybody's
If
coming
you're
out of
doing it
something.
right, everything's
Yeah,
a recovery group
yeah,
because no matter what it is, it's all about association,
yeah.
right? And the men that you surround yourself with, are your circle. That's who you're gonna be.
Yeah,
And so you surround yourself with drug addicts, you're gonna be a drug addict.
right.
You surround
That's
yourself
exactly
with
right.
people that are,
Yeah,
you know, hungry for change and want to do
yep,
the best that they can, then you're gonna be that person.
yeah,
And I think that that's why that group that we're in is so impactful. But
yeah.
it's
Yeah, so my big message for guys is just isolation is a killer.
yeah,
It's an absolute killer. So if it's not going to coffee with a good friend, you know, find a group,
yeah.
so you can just sit there and not say anything for a while. You can just be in the group, and eventually those connections will be made. But I mean, you cannot do life alone. You cannot isolate yourself, especially with addiction.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I think we can end on that because that's so impactful and I mean
Yeah.
that's the right message, right? Like you gotta find your dudes. And
Yeah.
and I think one of the things that um we want our listeners to know too is if you need help, if you need anything else, you can always reach out to us. Playingthroughpod.com is our website. You can also email us at that and then find us on Instagram, Playing Through Pod. We post a bunch of stuff. And if you're struggling with something, shoot us a DM, get a hold of us somehow, some way. We might not have the answer, but we'll help you find the answer. And always just remember you're worth it. Thanks, dude.
Playing through the storm, and I pray you get me through. I'm feeling kinda used, and I know you'll make me new. I'm playing through the